Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be talking about Carl Theodor Dreyer's 1932 fantasy horror film Vampyr. The film was written by Kristen Jewell, based on a book by Sheridan Le Fanu. It stars Julian West, Maurice Schutz, Renee Medell, Sybil Schmitz, and Jan Hieronyminck. Oh, that's a name. And then the rest of the cast is actually just filled out by a lot of non-actors, kind of like Soderbergh before Soderbergh. He just saw interesting people and he was like, "Hey, come be in this movie." And who doesn't want to be in a movie, right? That's a flattering thing to be asked. The description is a drifter obsessed with the supernatural stumbles upon an inn where a severely ill adolescent girl is slowly becoming a vampire. Now, this is an interesting movie. So this was the first talkie that Carl Theodor Dreyer directed. He had directed some silent films before this, but this is the first time that he was jumping to this new technology. And it's interesting to watch because it is clearly a transitionary period between silent film and spoken film, or sound film. It's because it is constructed largely like a silent movie, and part of the reason was because of it was an international cast that spoke a bunch of different languages, and they also made the movie in three different languages. They made it in English, in German, and in French. So to kind of mitigate the technical difficulties of having to do that, they basically made a silent film with very minimal dialogue. There's even, kind of descriptor and title cards type stuff that will kind of fill in the gaps of the story and kind of tell you what's going on, because it doesn't do a great job of doing that. I would say it's even mildly incoherent. It's a movie that is kind of a beautiful movie, and it has a great mastery of atmosphere and tone. But in terms of execution of a coherent story, maybe not so much. It does a lot of heavy lifting, like I said, with the title cards, and also there's times, especially in the third act, when things are starting to really reveal themselves, that people are just reading out of books and you just see the passages from the books to read that kind of describe the idea of vampires. These are things that would be exposition dialogue in a regular movie, in a more modern movie. And here you read about it, which is fine. You put it into the context of the time that it came out, and obviously it's fine. I had been wanting to watch this for years because just of I've seen a lot of stills from it, and it just seems really interesting. And that is kind of the reason to watch the movie. It's a very visually arresting film. And even for the time, there's a lot of cool film tricks in there. There's a lot of interesting cut-ins and whatnot. Because at the time, you watch a lot of older movies, there's not a lot of edits, right? They do everything in kind of single takes, long single takes, and they kind of build a set that would be something you could build on a stage. And then they kind of go from there. I mean, granted, I'm not saying broadly, but from the early 30s, there was a lot of stuff like that, because film was such a nascent thing anyways, and it had only been around for 14, 15 years in terms of being a commercial thing that people went to the theaters to see movies. So it was in the nascent stages of building kind of film language. And this is definitely something you could see as being an influence and a touchstone. Famously, this movie actually really bombed when it came out. Dreyer kind of hated the movie because of what it did to his career. He was not a big fan of it. It got him. It kind of put him on the back burner. He almost kind of went into an early version of like director's jail for a little while. And I think part of that is because it is, in terms of a narrative, not super satisfying. And it's very ambiguous in a way that is not doesn't always feel fruitful. I mean, because of just pop culture and pop culture osmosis, where we kind of learn everything about movies and vampire stories, I think a modern audience is probably going to get a little bit more out of it because we can understand the cues for a vampire story. For some of the characters, there's like a Van Helsing stand-in in the movie. There's a character that's basically a stand-in for somebody like Jonathan Harker from Bram Stoker's Dracula, just like Van Helsing. So they have kind of like these equivalencies that people maybe were not so aware of at the time, but something that has obviously permeated our culture for years and years and years. even, just a few years after this, Universal does its version of Dracula. So I think our acuity for understanding what it's trying to accomplish is probably a little bit more developed. We can just appreciate the subtlety and the nuance of what he was going for, because it's a really interesting movie, and it does a lot of cool things, and it deals with not just vampires in general, but also kind of the just supernatural. The main character is a guy that is just a supernatural obsessive. He's kind of like a old school, or not vampire, but like ghost hunter. And he goes to places where he hears there are allegedly supernatural things. And then he at some point becomes subject to the supernatural himself. It's got a really interesting kind of early ghost scene that both I thought was really cool visually. And it was cool. The camera tricks they used to accomplish it were also very cool, but it did make me chuckle a little bit, because he's a ghost and he doesn't understand that he's dead, and he tries to open a door. And I don't know why I found that really, really it made me chuckle. I don't know why. But the cast is pretty good. I actually really enjoyed the performances in the movie. Even the locals that were hired, they add a lot of texture to the movie. There's a lot of great faces in this movie, a lot of great presences that don't feel manufactured in the way that sometimes Hollywood feels like they, forcefully manufacture, just an aesthetic. It feels kind of real and lived in. And if I'm not mistaken, it was actually filmed on location somewhere. I can't remember exactly where. Drawing a blank. But it was filmed on location somewhere. And they did, and Dreyer had a lot of cool forward-thinking ideas. Like, he wanted to make it kind of feel like an old haunted story. And so what he did was he took like a piece of cloth and he put it over the lens of the camera, a really thin piece of cloth, to kind of give everything this glow and this kind of faded like imagery, like looking at an old photograph. Which, for the time, that's pretty forward thinking, in my opinion, in terms of the idea of like making a movie and what makes a movie work and trying to communicate ideas just visually. I think this movie is full of awesome examples of that, and awesome examples of the development of storytelling, visual storytelling. It's very, very cool. A lot of cool tricks. I would actually, I probably would say that I probably prefer something like Nosferatu to this, the silent version of Nosferatu. But I think this is a worthy effort for the time. And I'm surprised that people kind of completely dismissed it, right? Like, I know that it, like I said, there is kind of an incoherence to the story. It's kind of hard to piece together what's going on for large portions of the movie. I would say the first, like the bulk of the movie, 50 minutes, feels just kind of like these little disconnected episodes until things kind of start coming together at the end in the third act. But even in the third act, you're still kind of left curious about, like, well, what is happening and what what is going on? Like, what is the ultimate end of the story? What's the thematic pull line? What's the subtext here? Because it feels very straightforward. It feels very surface level. I guess the big takeaway is like, be careful what you wish for, kind of thing. If you go looking for the devil, you just might find him, type of story. It would be cool. I don't know if this has ever been remade. I think this would be ripe for a remake. And I'm not a huge fan of remakes, and I'm not somebody that thinks they're often necessary. But I would say in this case, I think there's enough of like just a bare bones idea that somebody could really take this and run with it and make like a cool gothic horror movie. Maybe somebody like Guillermo del Toro, who I have very mixed feelings about. But if you watch something like Crimson Peak, I think he could do something very interesting with this story, with this setting, because I'm trying to struggle to think who else would be good. Oh, or Panos Cosmatos, actually. Cosmatos, the guy who directed Mandy. This would be perfect for him. Yeah, I should send him an email. Panos, old buddy, good friend. We've never spoken, but I think you should check out the movie Vampyr and maybe do something with it. Because it has like this kind of tone poem, lyrical sense about it. It feels more like a mood piece. And Panos is really good at that. I call them panos because, like I said, we're good friends that just have never met. But yeah, it would be interesting to see that. To see somebody else take this material and do something, somebody that's unique and that has a unique vision and a unique voice, kind of like Dreyer did at the time, and really expand upon it and kind of build it out and make it a little more coherent. Because I'm sure on paper this makes sense, right? I'm sure if I read the script or if there was a book version of it, which there is, maybe I'm sure it holds together a little bit better in terms of understandability, I guess. But as I said, it's a mood piece and it's a good one, and it's only an hour and 15 minutes. Not a huge investment. But I think it's important that people go back and watch these movies as film fans. Like, if you want to be serious about, whether it's criticism or you want to be a filmmaker yourself or whatever, I think something that especially the millennial generation could really learn from is going back and watching some of these silent films. Go back and watch some Fritz Lang. Go watch something like Vampyr. They can learn a lot. They could learn a lot because these people had to tell stories without being explicit about them. I'm not saying that Vampyr is like kind of a sterling example of coherence, like I said, but what it does in terms of directing your eye and creating a mood and a tone, it nails it. It absolutely nails it. And that's something I think is lacking in a lot of modern cinema. There's no subtlety to anything. There's the idea of subtext has completely been destroyed. Like, if you don't speak something, if the character does not speak the subtext of the movie, people don't pick up on it. There's no layers there. That's why, we've been going back on Zoobox Goes to the Movies, and we've been doing some Kubrick movies. We've done 2 Kubrick movies. We've done The Shining, and we've done Dr. Strangelove. Me and my friend Big Paul coming in and helping me out. And what you kind of remind yourself is like how powerful a medium film can be, and how much you can seed in there, and how many things you can layer, what you can say without actually having to literally say it. So people would do well to go back, especially people my age and younger would do well to go back to basics, back to where it all started, and rediscover these movies. Apparently, I guess there is a longer cut of this movie that has never seen the light of day. The only one that's available right now, I believe, is the French cut of the film. Because I guess it just got lost, just like a lot of things. So it was kind of in legend for a long time that it even existed. And it wasn't until, I think, the late 90s or early 2000s that there was actually like a cut you could buy, which is crazy to think about. But now it's on Criterion. I think it's on the Criterion channel. It's also currently on HBO Max in their curated like Turner Classic Movie section. That's where I saw it from. That's where I watched it. And yeah, it's totally worth your time if you're just a lover of film and lover of the history of film, and you want some broader context for the things that you watch nowadays. These are the kind of movies that have informed everything. Go back and watch them. Do yourself a favor. This is my version of go read a book, assholes. There's more than just Harry Potter out there. Hey-o! All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you would like to know more about Zoobox, if you want to keep up with everything that's going on in Zoobox Nation, there are some links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. And also, if you would like to see me talk about something specific, a specific movie you'd like to hear my thoughts on, please leave it in the comments, and I will put it on the list. And at some point, I'll get to it. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Goodbye.